Gnome's Adwaita Icon Theme is an objectively broken theme. This is not up for debate, this is a fact. This issue was risen by Nate Graham of the KDE project about 3 weeks ago. Symbolic icons only have the symbolic suffix, breaking compatibility with FDO-compatible apps. I have been waiting for all of this to get resolved since it first began, and to my surprise, it actually happened. You'll see how a bit later. For now though, let's go over the details. So according to the FDO icon theme spec, which is the spec you're supposed to follow if you're making an icon theme that acts like an icon theme, a ton of the Adwaita icons are simply named incorrectly. And when they're incorrectly named, if you try to do a lookup against an icon theme, you won't be able to find the icon. So, as an example, there is an icon in the theme called edit-copy-symbolic. Now, the correct name in the spec is edit-copy. What this is for the copy action. Fairly straightforward. What Gnome is using symbolic to mean is this is not a full color icon, this is an icon that can be recolored. So if you set an accent color and you notice that a bunch of icons all using the exact same color, those are all symbolic icons. It's a great idea, but the problem is there are a lot of applications that don't make use of these recolored icons and instead only rely on what is specifically in the spec. When Adwaita is the system's default icon theme and such an app asks for edit copy, it's not found. Per the icon loading spec, the icon loader will chop off the last part and look for edit. That won't be present in Adwaita either. Hence, no icon will be found, and the app will have a blank space instead of a copy icon. Users will report bugs, complain on Reddit, and make 20-minute YouTube videos crooning, "Why?" into a camera. Why? Hi, Nate. Now, KDE is not opposed to this symbolic convention. In fact, they actually like it themselves and have been adopting it in their own applications. But in Breeze, they haven't completely abandoned the icon theme specification. What they do is symlink their symbolic icons back to the regular icons, so at least something is being shown. And it seems that Adwaita does not have these compatibility symlinks, or else remove them at some point. This is problematic because it breaks icon theme loading in FDO-compatible apps that haven't been ported to ask for symbolic icons, which is nearly all of them. So consider adding or re-adding compatibility symlinks so that apps outside of Gnome and KDE aren't missing almost all of the symbolic icons when using Adwaita. This seems like a pretty reasonable change to make because this is going to be affecting applications running on Gnome that are not part of the core Gnome applications or Gnome circles that are using their new symbolic system. It's going to be affecting those third-party applications. But the responses started off fantastically. This doesn't feel very actionable from my side. The symbolic suffix separates the different recoloring behavior of symbolic icons. Linking to symbolic icons to expose them in the non-recolorable code path will introduce all sorts of issues. Adwaita Icon Theme is not a generic icon theme from the 2000s anymore. Its scope narrowed to serving a few core Gnome apps. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. The issue is that is not the way the icon theme is being used by the computer. If Adwaita doesn't want to be an FDO icon theme, that is fine. But the problem is that Adwaita is advertising itself as an FDO-compatible icon theme via some metadata. As a result, distros are setting Adwaita as the default FDO icon theme, and then apps that expect the default icon theme to be FDO compatible get broken in the way I described. It sounds like maybe you should remove the metadata that advertises Adwaita as being an FDO icon theme, and then have individual apps opt out into using its icon specifically. Otherwise, you'll keep breaking non-Gnome apps in distros that make Adwaita the default icon theme. This turned into an argument over whether or not the metadata attached to the file actually advertises it as an FDO icon theme. Nate thinks it does. The Gnome person, Jacob, thinks that it doesn't. This didn't go anywhere. Nate then says, no, that's not what's happening. On Fedora 40 workstation, Adwaita is set as the default icon theme on the system. There is no fallback chain. This is a Gnome system, not a KDE system. on such a system when you run a non-GNOME app such as KDE's Kate, icons are missing because Kate asks for FTO-compatible names, e.g. edit copy, which are not found in either Adwaita or Highcolor. And here is an example of what is going wrong. Everywhere an arrow is pointing to, there should be an icon being shown, but because the icon is named incorrectly in Adwaita, and on Fedora, it's using the Adwaita Icon Theme as the default theme, those icons are just not present. And even with it clearly being said what is going on here, Jacob misunderstands what is going on. I'll be happy to roll out some legacy full-color icon theme for the fallback to use downstream, but it's hardly a reasonable proposal to continue shipping ancient full-color assets for KDE to fall back to here. Again, KDE apps are not falling back to anything. They are asking for icons in the active icon theme, and those icons are missing from Adwaita. They're not asking for some special icons, they are asking for icons that are in the spec. And here we have Matthias Klassen of GNOME. All of this is fighting yesterday's war. Icon themes are not a very prominent feature in current app development, and demanding that we do lots of extra work to implement specs that were conceived in a very different time and environment is not helping the situation. Icon themes are still quite actively used outside of the GNOME desktop. Nate says, I am not asking you to implement a spec you don't want to implement. You do you. In fact, I'm asking you to stop implementing it so that you're not breaking apps that do use icon themes. The problem here is you've got Adwaita advertising itself as an icon theme to apps that use icon themes, but it's not actually intended to be used for this purpose. The main issue here is GNOME is hooking into the existing icon theme infrastructure to do this thing which is not an icon theme. What they should be doing is building a system completely separate to that. But because they're not doing that, and they're sort of like hacking their fake icon theme to work with GNOME, it's causing downstream issues with applications outside of GNOME. Registering as an FDO icon theme creates the implicit assumption that the so-registered theme is actually usable by apps that requested themed icons from an FDO-style icon theme. Maybe this is an implicit assumption rather than an explicit one, but it's still clearly there. All I'm asking for is symlinks like this. Edit copy to edit copy symbolic. It is not going to look perfect, but this would unbreak non-GNOME apps using the Adwaita icon theme because asking for icons like edit copy would work again. If you're not willing to do that, then Adwaita is not capable of being a proper icon theme for non-GNOME apps that expect the normal FDO-style icon theming to work. I get that you guys don't like icon theming. That's fine, and it's your right. But right now, your icon theme is intentionally breaking non-GNOME apps that do like and use FDO-style icon theming. Please consider adding compatibility symlinks to unbreak non-GNOME apps using the Adwaita icon theme. Now, there is a good suggestion here. I could see a possible future where the full-color icons are automatically generated and recolored from the symbolic sources. To us, the full-color icons are legacy, and Jacob clearly doesn't want to maintain them anymore. In the long term, that would probably work pretty well, but it probably would take a bit to get something resolved here. And this right here might be my favorite comment in the entire thread. Modern GNOME apps do not use full-color icons. Fair enough. I am not sure what default icon theme even means these days. Now, this is hyperbole, but it goes back to a point I've said many times in the past. I think it is healthy for developers to try out other software, try out other desktops, and experience what it is like as a GNOME developer using KDE, as a KDE developer using Cosmic, and so on and so forth, because everybody on every other desktop knows what a default icon theme is, but because GNOME has been doing their own thing for so long, this is an actual statement being made. But at least he proposed some solutions, maintaining a set of full-color assets in the Adwaita icon theme that isn't actually used by core GNOME apps, not Circle apps, or any modern maintained apps. Modern maintained apps do use them, just not GNOME apps. sim-linking names to symbolic variants which will break recoloring. It's better than having no icon whatsoever. Mangling the index theme metadata so the Adwaita Icon Theme drops the icon lookup machinery. While it may fix Kate, it will break Gnome. And this final point, Nate had some things to say about. If this breaks Gnome, it's because you folks chose to repurpose an FDO icon theme to be something it wasn't designed to be, which breaks its non-Gnome consumers. Maybe you folks didn't think there were any remaining consumers of FDO icon themes. This goes back to a lot of Gnome people only living in Gnome. I could see how that seems like a reasonable conclusion to reach if you didn't look at any KDE apps. I'll admit, in my own investigations, I found no apps outside of KDE that do use FDO icon theming by default. Most that do support it make it opt-in and bundled needed icons. However, in KDE, we have thus far adhered to the FDO icon theming spec and use it by default. We have over 200 cross-platform apps, so hopefully we're not chopped liver. At this point, what's done is done, so we need to move forward rather than relitigating the past. It seems like you folks should work towards creating a repository of icons for your own purposes that doesn't use the FDO icon theming machinery at all, so it doesn't trick apps that use FDO icon theming into using it and getting broken. From there were discussions to maybe change the way the icon theme spec works, because if they both support symbolic, that should probably be part of the spec. And finally, he hadn't shown up yet, but we saw Matthias Klump. We can for sure make changes to the specs. In fact, introducing symbolic convention properly is on my long to-do list already. It should also be a no-brainer since both Gnome and KDE already implemented, so we would just have to properly document it. MRs are very welcome. This leads us into the update to the spec itself. Don't worry, this is not the only additional issue we're going to go through. Now, the spec is in a very weird position because whilst it is heavily used by KDE applications, and it's heavily used by other desktop applications, it is not at all used by Gnome, and there is a lot of generic third-party applications which do not even look at the spec whatsoever. So clearly, FDO icon theming as currently implemented is not meeting the needs of app developers. I think a major part of the problem is the lack of assurance that any icon your app may need will actually be present in the icon theme. This is because of several factors. The icon naming specs list of mandatory apps is woefully low, nowhere near what's needed today. The process of proposing and adding new mandatory icons to the spec so that you can count on them is too heavyweight and bureaucratic to be attractive to app developers. Even if that challenge were overcome, as mandatory new icons are added to the spec, there's no guarantee that arbitrary third-party icon themes will fully comply with it by implementing those new icons. With this going on, Sunny from Gnome has a completely reasonable question. Why revive the theme? What's the use case here? From Nate, my motivation is to stimulate discussion one way or another, ideally to reach one of the following conclusions. It's still useful, so rehabilitate it so that it can work as intended and figure out how to do that. It's not useful or can't be made to work as intended, so let's formally kill it so everyone in the FOSS space is on the same page. Right now we're in this weird halfway point where KDE and other DE communities use it actively. Gnome doesn't use it at all, except when they're breaking the infrastructure to make their icons work. Besides that, third-party apps kinda sorta implement it on an opt-in basis. I think it's a fairly incoherent situation if you're an app developer that bears clarifying. Sunny clarifies that Gnome has zero interest in supporting icon themes going forward. Gnome consensus is that icon themes are detrimental to QA and make Linux app development harder than it needs to be, leading to the wrong icon metaphor being used or missing icons. It is very funny that he mentions missing icons when this entire situation is caused by Adwaita not following the spec, making the icons be missing. We are investigating solutions to move away from icon themes. This is an issue opened up about a year ago by Matthias Klassen. I don't want to hear from people going forward that GTK is a generic toolkit. It's not. it's a Gnome toolkit. Yes, libadwaita makes it more Gnome, and that's the very, very Gnome part. But even GTK by itself is not generic anymore. It is designed specifically around what Gnome needs. I don't think we'll be interested in supporting this on the desktop or app side of things. But this puts the spec in a really weird position. Actually, it puts it in the position that it's already in. Free desktop isn't just for Gnome and KDE, and it would be nice to have them both on board trying to sort out a spec, but if one of them is missing, it does put the spec in a weird situation where it's effectively dead in the water. Unlike a bunch of Wayland protocols, maybe you can get away with not having Gnome on board, because whilst Gnome apps are going to look weird, they were going to look weird anyway, because Gnome is not really a big fan of theming anymore, so that's becoming more of a problem. If icon theming is also an issue, the apps are just going to stand out no matter what. But if every other desktop wants to support icon theming, then I guess the other desktops can just do that instead. As this discussion went on, it forked off into a bunch of other discussions. Drop action icons from the naming specification. Specify how icon recoloring should be done. Specify the symbolic suffix. So this is about getting symbolic into the spec. But all three of these discussions are still fairly early days and probably will get resolved at some point in the future, but at least for now, they're not our main focus. Whilst this just started with Nate and a couple of Gnome people arguing about icon themes, this greatly expanded from there. This user, Axeli, suggests making a reference FDO theme and using that as basically a fallback if icons are missing, and potentially basing that theme on something like Papyrus. We got a big essay from Joshua Strobel of the Budgie Project, along with a different post from Jeremy Soller of System 76 working on the Cosmic desktop. For any future Cosmic enjoyers, for now, Cosmic attempts to utilize icon names that match the aging FDO specification as much as possible, and applications that have non-specified icons bundle them. Users of Cosmic have the ability to set a custom icon theme. Most of the icons we use are symbolic and recolorable. The notable exception to this is the file manager, where full color MIME type icons are used. Cosmic is just farming W's. I have not found a single thing I don't like about what Cosmic is doing. Take that back. I think their light theme is really ugly, but you can do some theming. Besides these desktops, a bunch of other developers chimed in, giving their perspective of whether they do or don't use icon themes. Back to Nate Graham. Given that Gnome folks seem uninterested in runtime swappable icon themes, I see a few paths forward. The remaining users of the icon theme spec who are okay with runtime icon swapping cooperate to make it better, and Gnome ignores it. The icon naming spec collapses into something very small that only specifies a few mandatory icons used in cross-distro projects like Portals, and then Gnome signs onto that. Gnome and KDE and others collaborate on a technical spec of some sort for icon recoloring, if we can manage to come to an agreement on that somehow. I'm going to tell you now, Nate, you've seen the Wayland discussions. That'll take about 4 years to resolve. I get to watch this mess from the outside and bring it to you guys. I feel really bad for Matthias Klump because he has spent this entire time basically trying to keep the conversation on track to make sure it doesn't turn into what happens over in the Wayland protocol discussions, where basically every single long-running discussion turns incredibly toxic. And for some reason, there is a bunch of people in there that just don't know how to act like adults and have a proper discussion. If I had my way, there would be a ton of people banned from Wayland protocols. Just as a general note, I do want to see as much cooperation as possible here, and I encourage people to reach out to other desktops, including Gnome, for feedback and to gauge interest in implementing specification changes. I also see it generally as a good thing for Gnome developers to comment on an approach, even if they've decided to abandon it. In the best case, a shared solution can be forged. In the worst case, the developers of other desktops are at least aware at that point of the issues that Gnome has ran into and can consider them. Maybe people are even convinced that one or the other solution was better than what they were previously pursuing. Something to keep in mind here, even if Gnome will not use the icon theme / icon naming specs in the future, they are a compatible desktop right now. So while designing an updated proposal, please do so in a way that is backwards compatible and does not break Gnome. So let's move forward, but with respect for each other. I like Matthias. He's a cool dude. While all of this was going on, there was also a discussion happening over on the KDE side. How to ensure KDE apps have usable icons when not run in a Plasma session. Which I'm not sure why they weren't doing this before, but it had a pretty reasonable suggestion. Why don't we just blacklist Adwaita and ask distributions to mark Breeze as a required dependency of KDE applications? It should have been that way the entire time. That way, if the system theme is set to a broken theme, like Adwaita, we can just ignore the system preference and use our own valid and working theme. This may cause issues with recoloring icons, but again, an icon is better than no icon. Whilst all of this was going on, trying to discuss how to fix the spec, how to fix the applications, how to update the spec, there was a discussion which most people didn't realize was happening. This was a discussion on the Gnome side. Introduce a legacy fallback theme, Adwaita Icon Theme Legacy. I'd like to propose a legacy Gnome icon theme to avoid breaking older apps still using full color icons or apps using a different symbolic machinery while continuing to ship maintained symbolics that modern Gnome apps use. And then just a few days ago, they actually dropped it. Adwaita Icon Theme Legacy. Initial release of Adwaita Icon Theme Legacy 46.2 is available for download. It's meant to address third-party apps depending on old-style full-color icons that are no longer shipped with modern Gnome SDKs. Let me explain something to you. This theme existing makes the last 15 or 20 minutes completely irrelevant. If this theme was just agreed on to be made from the start, none of the rest of this discussion would have happened. And in case you didn't realize, Jacob here is the first person who responded on this thread right here. If he just said, okay, legacy theme, sure, let's do that, none of this would have happened. I love Linux, I love open source, I love FOSS. This is the kind of nonsense that makes me love making these videos. There is so much more to this discussion, and I'll leave all of the links down below for you to go check out for yourself. I highly recommend you read it because it's chaotic, but unlike Wayland chaotic, it's compressed into a 3-week span, so it's a bit more, I guess, easy to approach. So if you somehow made it to the end, let me know your thoughts down below. For the record, I have nothing against Gnome completely hating the idea of icon themes. The issue is Adwaita Icon Theme pretends to be an icon theme. If it didn't do that, there would be no problem whatsoever. So let me know your thoughts down below. And if you liked the video, like the video, really like the video, and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Brodie linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and God, this is going to be a nightmare to edit.
Something like this.